Welcome, and thank you for joining the Breakdown with Professor V. Because this is our inaugural episode, I wanted to explain who Professor V is. I mean, if I'm going to be, breaking down these news stories and, what's going on in current events and politics, you should at least know who I am. So, Professor V is an adjunct professor of political science and paralegal studies. She has a law degree, and someday she will pass the California bar exam. The California bar exam is one of the hardest bar exams in the country. Someday I will pass. Professor V also has a Master of Legal Studies with an emphasis in human rights. This was my favorite degree to get. I was able to study the United Nations and other human rights bodies. I was able to study international criminal law involving war crimes, genocide, and other things to me that are, fascinating. You will hear about, genocide and war crimes, as this podcast goes on, because it is an interest of mine. Professor V also loves teaching her students how American government works and equipping students with the tools to take part in our political society. Let's face it, things have been crazy in our society since 2020. They're only getting crazier. And every single one of us has the capability to be a political actor in our society and help accomplish the change we need to make our country great. Professor V's interests also involve reading. The breakdown may eventually have book reviews just because I read so much. I've been like that since I was a kid. Professor V also enjoys watching the news, studying Russian, Privyet, Как дела, ballroom dance, watching the Bravo show Below Deck. I mean, I need some kind of television show to relax to, right? That's not too serious. And hanging out with her 4 dogs, Noelle, Vivian, Snickerdoodle, and Abby. Now that you know who Professor V is, let's dive into the show. This episode, we will be discussing the attack on Speaker Nancy Pelosi's husband, Paul Pelosi. Let's break down the Paul Pelosi incident. During the early morning hours of Friday, October 28th, Paul Pelosi, husband to Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, was attacked by an intruder with a hammer. Mr. Pelosi was transported to the hospital where he successfully underwent surgery for a skull fracture. The intruder was taken into custody by police and faces attempted murder, elder abuse, Mr. Pelosi's in his 80s, as well as a plethora of other charges. The intruder has been described as a radical nudist. Okay, so that is the press release version of what happened. Now let's break it down. That's why you're here. So multiple news outlets have discovered that the intruder, a man named David DePape, was in his underwear and apparently wanted to tie Mr. Pelosi up and wait for his wife, the Speaker, Nancy, to come home. Even more bizarre is how Mr. Pelosi was able to call 911. He told, the intruder that he had to go to the bathroom. Apparently the suspect, the intruder, was cool with this and let Mr. Pelosi walk to the bathroom where he was able to call 911. What's really interesting with this is, and I have listened to the San Francisco police chief's press conference a few times now. The chief says that when the police arrived at the home, somebody let them in, an unknown person, indicating there was a third party there, during the burglary and during, this whole incident. From the sounds of it, it doesn't sound like Mr. Pelosi was attacked until the police actually got into the house where they found Mr. this intruder, DePape, and, Pelosi, struggling with a hammer. At that point, once he struck Mr. Pelosi, the police did tackle him. So some of this, it just doesn't make sense. Yes, the violence is wrong. I will never, support violence against anybody. But what is interesting is that the Pelosis, who are millionaires, and also, Speaker Pelosi is second in line to the presidency, did not have security in their home. I would think that due to the high-profile nature of the speaker's position and their wealth, it would be prudent to have security at the home at all times. One would think they would even have, an alarm service. The intruder apparently, broke in, and one would assume that if there was an alarm service, that would, generate a call to the police. But what's also really interesting, if you look at, the images that have been released since then, the glass from when he broke in was on the outside of the door. Now, I'm not saying, that I'm speaking from experience that I break windows, but if somebody, typically breaks a window, the glass is going to go inside the house. So there's a lot of really interesting questions about what truly happened that night at the Pelosi home. I do hope that Mr. Pelosi has a successful recovery. Nobody deserves to be beaten with a hammer, and gotta hurt. And I do feel for the speaker having been in DC when this happened. But I think this is also, you're hearing more and more that either people running for office or, members of, the House or the Senate are facing things like intruders. Marjorie Taylor Greene has been swatted multiple times. A few years ago, Rand Paul was attacked by a neighbor. It is unfortunate that we live in a society where this is becoming common. It's also interesting to know, the Pelosis, they live in San Francisco. Crime in California is up. Crime in San Francisco is up. It's just not a good thing. Anyways, that was our first story and the first thing we wanted to discuss. Now, I do think as this saga unfolds, because more will be coming out, the breakdown will break it down some more. Now, let's talk about the next episode. Next, we're going to look into President Biden's plan to save the economy by going after airline seat fees or other junk fees. The article, that I read, in it, President Biden says that, marginalized and people of color are being economically targeted because they have to pay for extra seat room on an airplane. Or, concert fees, booking fees, all these fees. We all have to pay them. But I really don't think that that's going to save the economy. I look forward to delving into this issue and trying to see what does need to happen for us to have a better economy. We all deserve so much better. But for now, that is the breakdown with Professor V. I hope you enjoyed this first episode. Please like, subscribe, comment. If you have any stories you would like me to break down, let me know. And you can reach me on Instagram at AmandaV911. So, thank you. Bye.